Welcome to the Oxygen Advantage podcast with your host, Oxygen Advantage founder Patrick McKeown. With the Oxygen Advantage podcast, we aim to show how functional breathing is an essential part of a healthy and well-balanced lifestyle. Each episode, we meet experts in their field from around the world and talk about their lives, their experiences, and how they learned the importance of breathing. Join us and get inspired. Get the Oxygen Advantage.
So this might be a podcast with a difference. It's not normal that I talk business related and philanthropy. It will be the first time actually during one of our podcasts. However, this was an opportunity I couldn't miss. Dr. Declan Ryan is the son of the founder of Ryanair. And the reason that I bring in that introduction is because I'm sure you're all familiar with Ryanair and what a legacy to leave behind. So, Declan, it's a pleasure to talk with you, and I would love for our conversation that if there was a 20-year-old or 25 or 30-year-old person listening to us, it's really to get your insights as a business leader and as somebody who has helped with setting up numerous different companies and also one foundation and your philanthropy, and it's getting inside your mind a little bit. So welcome.
Thank you very much, Pat.
So in terms of, I'd love to know what makes you tick. Even say your normal kind of working life, and I'd love to know this work-life balance in context of, I read about your father. He was pretty relentless as a worker, and his father before that was a very hard worker.
Yeah, I don't think I'm as relentless as they are. But when you are successful, and I kind of mean financially there, you get options. So I'm not saying being wealthy is a good thing, but it does create options. And I try to make sure a couple of hours a day to myself, or to my family or my partner or whatever. So, having done Pat, should I call you Patrick or Pat?
Oh, Pat is fine.
Okay, yeah. I used to, the reason I call myself Dec is because when I was a kid and you were called Declan, you knew you were in shite. So from here on in, I've called myself Dec. But anyway, what makes me tick? I adore reading. So I actually, the answer there should be curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can remain curious, and it doesn't matter what the subject is, if you can remain curious, I just think your brain, is always stimulated. And I think we've all experienced it, but there's nothing better than a good book. And I think we're all the same. We kind of slow down towards the end because we don't want it to finish, so I think curiosity is the answer. And I don't have a clue, by the way, if the next question is, can you learn that or not? I just think some people have it and some people don't, but I've never thought about the issue of, can you learn curiosity? To answer the question, I think you can probably teach yourself to be curious.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, because even as I'm thinking about your father and as an entrepreneurial spirit, entrepreneurs have to be curious because they have to see different angles. And very few people are made of the cloth to be an entrepreneur. Even a small business owner, like a lot of people are happy when things are packaged for them and they don't have to have the responsibility outside of it. But I think somebody who is very, very curious is not just in terms of, I don't think what you mean by curious on a personal level, but curious as well is to put yourself into new challenges. Would that be part of it?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. Our last airline that we recently sold to Avianca in Colombia, Viva. I'll give you an example of being curious at work. We take, and it's not just us, the whole industry takes safety very, very seriously. And one of my bugbears at the moment is if there's an incident with an aircraft and you have to evacuate, people take their fucking luggage with them, their hand luggage. And, you know, we all say that we wouldn't do that, but it happens. And, you know, listen, I understand some of the motivation. It might be a passport, it might be, you know, your computer or whatever. So we have been talking to, I can say Irlandia now. Irlandia and Viva have been talking to Airbus, because that's the aircraft we operate, to have a switch for the crew to lock the bins. So you don't have a choice. But when you think about it, Pat, if you're getting off, evacuating an airplane, you know, A, you shouldn't get in anybody's way, and B, you shouldn't hesitate. So that's being curious. We're very curious business-wise, and I won't bog on about it now, but we're moving to the next level on aviation. We're moving away from fossil fuels into like electricity. That's great fun. So we're curious, yeah, and that's. I think that's it. But like, you also have to remember, you know, Tony. I was asked this question. Tony worked in Aer Lingus for 17 years. When he was leaving Aer Lingus, he was asked how long he worked there, and he said 1,000 years, right? So mavericks, by and large, don't settle into state-run companies, and I know Aer Lingus is a bit better. But I did these kind of behind closed door talks for universities, and I did one in Colombia, and it was an MBA class. And unfortunately, one of the kids asked me, would GPA and Ryanair have happened if Tony had went to college? It was a great question, but the answer is they wouldn't have happened. And by the way, this is not me urinating on having an education and third level degree and anything else like that, but universities do plug you into holes. And you know, you look at Zuckerberg and Gates and all Musk and all that, they all left university because they got bored. Now they're kind of 5-star examples, but you know.
It's a really good point. There's one course that I'm familiar with is Business, Economic and Social Studies in Trinity. And the only reason I'm familiar with it is because I did it. And so did Michael O'Leary. And so did a person called Terry Clune.
Yeah.
So I would know Terry. And I think there's a lot of similarities that some people who do go through university who are doing it to get that piece of paper, but ultimately university doesn't shape them because they are the mavericks.
So Michael is a great example, and he's a friend of mine, and quite interestingly, I was in class. We were all locked up in the boarding school down in Kildare. Anyway, I was in class with his brother Eddie. My brother Carl was 2 years ahead of Michael, and Michael was 2 years ahead of us. So, you know, Michael's a very interesting example because there's just a hunger there that I've never seen anybody else have, and I'm including boxers and everything. You know, I love the story when he used to work in the tax department in KPMG. And you had two, you probably heard this, he had two newspapers agents over in Walkinstown. So if you or I was being hired by Mick, the first thing he would do, have you heard this story?
No, I haven't.
Okay, no, I don't want to bore you. I love it. He used to put a £5 sterling into the till. And so when he came back on your first day of work and he was doing the catch up and you were gone, if the sterling fiver was gone, you were fired. And you know, that's so clever, you know, and yeah, there, you know, I was going to make a pile of jokes about Trinity, but there's just people who have hunger, Pat. You know,
Yes.
I don't, you know, so I need to be a little bit careful here, but we've interviewed people from MBAs here, and they couldn't change the plug. Like, you know, they're probably Einstein financially, but you just need to be, in our business anyway, you need to be streetwise and be able to read people. And culture, that's a very interesting subject, maybe at a different day. I think you can only teach culture when people are at work. If I went to work for you and I was trying to understand the culture of your business, but I was only with you one day a week, I'm not too sure I get your culture. Like you can imagine for Google, you know. And there's piles of different things there, Pat. Like, anyway, we were talking about all the bright guys out of Trinity and stuff, but you know, there's piles of stuff there with regard to working from home and working in the office. And by the way, I'm not one of these John Wayne types. I think the blend is fantastic. I know a lot of people, you know, I think I was in Copenhagen last week. 80% of Scandinavians are now doing 4 days a week. And you would have thought at the beginning it'd be the other way around with the Scandinavians and so on. But I think they've caught on that you can't teach culture. The other thing is you can't teach interns or apprentices if they're at home, you know, because they're not going to ring up the boss and say, what do you think? But if you're having a cup of coffee or what the Yanks say beside the water cooler, you go, Jesus, Pat, you know, I just don't understand how this bit of maths or engineering works, you know, and so I'm going off on a tangent, but I think it's an important point. But Tony's work ethic was world class, but I'm not too sure. He worked hard when he was in Aer Lingus, but I think the light bulb moment is we moved to Thailand in 1974, and myself and my 2 other brothers went there as well. And he brought, so the oil crisis was on, Aer Lingus had 2 jumbos they didn't need, and Tony leased both of them, as well as, like, they're called wet leases, as well as the cruise to Thailand. And you can imagine the benefit that had for Aer Lingus. It may have saved him. I don't know enough about the financials, but
it was enormous. I read the finances. I think it amounted to £5 million at the time. It was an enormous sum of money. Just for a little bit of context, Dec, in the background. So Tony Ryan, Declan's father, founded what was called Guinness Speed Aviation. And they were leasing aircrafts, but the start of it happened when he was working with Aer Lingus. So during the winter months, Aer Lingus aircraft would be sitting on the ground, whereas there were other aircraft or aircraft carriers at other parts of the world who would need these aircraft. So the idea was to lease them. So I'll pass it back to you, Dec.
I love the story. Arthur Walls, who became chairman of Ryanair, and a mentor of mine, a great guy, and I miss him regularly. He's not with us anymore. Arthur was the GM of Aer Lingus at the time, and they couldn't get rid of the 747s, and Tony was put in charge of getting rid of them. What Arthur did is he moved the 747s around, facing the Aer Lingus building and Tony's office. And Tony said to Arthur, like, do you really have to do that? And he said, I want you to think about them every fucking minute of the day. And it worked.
Hunger. Do you think hunger is a little bit from our environment? Because Ireland, economically, we were pretty much a basket case. There wasn't a whole lot going for somebody who was coming out of school at the time. And if you're a child growing up in a household whereby economics are not easy, it can give you a tremendous motivation to want to do better. Do you think, I'm only thinking about this, Ireland now has moved on quite a lot since the 70s and the 80s, and even the 90s here were tough. It only came right in the noughties, and then it collapsed again in 2010 or 2008. Do you think it's a little bit different in terms of the mindset for kids now coming up because of the environment that they were in?
It must be. I haven't really thought of it like that. And by the way, I'm not too sure what 100% what makes people hungry. But, certainly, I'll give you an example of Tony in a minute, but I just think we have to be careful not to label the youth coming through as not hungry.
Sure.
I'm not suggesting you are saying that, but I think of my own kids, and I'm very proud of them, and they're amazing people, but they're all hungry, so, but the story I want to tell about Tony, and by the way, Michael would be a great example of, having hunger, but also, he went to an expensive school and all that kind of stuff. So he certainly grew up middle class. Why does Michael have that hunger, right? But I remember Tony tells the story. He was, I was actually telling somebody this yesterday. Tony grew up in Limerick Junction. He was born there, and his dad was going for a council house in Thurles. They wanted to move, and I'm not too sure. He had 4 siblings. I'm not too sure all the kids were born, but he remembers his dad was a train driver, Martin. He remembers the night Martin came home. So Tony was the eldest. I think Tony was around 8 or 9 or whatever it was, and Martin telling his wife that they didn't get the council house, right? She gave him a right bollocking. And Tony just said the mood in the house for about a week was, black. And he just said, that's never going to happen to me. Now, it took him 17 years and at the age of 45 to become an entrepreneur. So the great thing about my own view on entrepreneurship is age doesn't matter. And actually, people post 40 or 50 are probably better at it than younger people. And the other thing is, I think any person who owns 2 Spar shops in Tralee or anywhere, I regard them as entrepreneurs.
Oh, totally. I would think so too. Yeah. It's interesting in terms of hunger.
Where did your hunger come from?
I didn't have a great financial background when I was a kid growing up. So I lived in Dunboyne, County Meath, and things were not easy financially. Quite a few kids. I left school initially at 14 because I didn't have the concentration levels because of sleep issues and things like that. So, but I went back 1 year later, and I remember going to Canada in 1988. My aunt brought me over there for 3 months, and it was the first time that I seen new cars, really nice houses, and all the traffics that you would have. And I came back to Ireland, and sometimes you have little experiences that really kind of shape you, even though you mightn't think of it back then. But that gave me a drive to get into one university, and that was TCD. And I did it. Now, I probably did the wrong degree. I won't say that, I'm not sure, but I found my calling afterwards. And we need a bit of luck as well. Your father, a little bit of luck went his way too, because one person had to retire and then he was chosen in terms of leasing.
I tell you where the real luck happened there, Pat, is he had a job in Irish Sugar in Thurles. So his dad died when he was doing his leaving cert, so they didn't have any choice. Like he had to, being the eldest, had it. And he went to an interview in Shannon or Lingus and bluffed that he was getting double the salary in Irish Sugar. But he could have well have, so that was luck, but he could have well have been working in Irish Sugar. And God knows what would have happened in my life if I had been born in Thurles. I don't say that in a bad way. I just say it like, we traveled all over the world, and like we spent 3 years in Thailand, and it was, I think I was like 9 to 12, but that was so impressionable, so a bit of luck all around for everybody, I think.
It is, and it kind of does it just seems to fall into place for some people. It's almost as if we attract our own luck, or at least when an opportunity presents itself, a go-getter is going to absolutely go for it.
We have a book coming out next year, and I'm not trying to promote it, but it's called Air Dogs.
Say that again.
Air Dogs.
Okay.
Okay, it's a little bit of a take from Phil Knight's book, which is Shoe Dogs. And there's a story in it that I can touch upon where we were dealing with GE, who are the big engine manufacturers for the 320. We were going with GE. We decided to stick with GE, thank God, because Pratt's have loads of problems at the moment. Anyway, I'm sitting down with a guy who feels like he's a Yank. His name is Shaker, and he grew up in a refugee camp in Beirut. I'll think of the valley, the Bakar Valley, north of Beirut. And I flew up to Boston to see him. And within 5 minutes, I went to myself, oh, fuck, I'm not going to get anything out of this meeting. And he just said no. Like, we needed we were having a spare engine, which is a lot of money. I can't recollect exactly the amount, but it's in its millions. And he said no. He just said no in the first 5 minutes. And I said, what the fuck are we going to talk about now to him? And I said, can you tell me your story? And he came from the same refugee camp I had been 6 months previously.
Wow.
And by the way, next 2 hours, like people in my family and here in the office go, oh, Jesus, please don't raise refugees with that. He'll bore the shite out of you, right? We spoke for 2 hours about refugees. And at the end of the meeting, Shaker said to me, I'll try to do something on that engine for you. And he did. And that's fucking luck. Good karma as well, but it's luck as well. And, I forgot the story, and one of the guys in here, one of the dogs, reminded me of it. And I went, yeah, no, we need to tell that story because it's just lovely. It just.
But it's even more because it's not just the business context, it's actually the human relationship, which seems to be more important in terms that we are social beings. And you could even bring that into context today with mobile phone use. And there's almost as if there's an idea that we're all cocooning and we're all looking into screens, we're losing that social aspect of it, which is really vitally important. And that's an example.
We said it before we went on air. Like, we haven't met each other, but we've gotten known each other by Zoom and phone calls and texts and so on. But I don't really think I know anybody until I meet them face to face.
Yeah.
And Zoom is great, but the thing I hated about it during COVID is you couldn't tell how the person was. Because I think we have this inbuilt thing like Showtime. Am I looking okay? Do I sound okay? I would never on a Zoom call, certainly several people on the call, ask you about how your mom is or how's your own mental health or, stuff I ask people all the time when I'm face to face with them. It's a bit, it's not the right way to ask somebody that, in a multiple call with other people. And you don't feel like asking. By the way, who am I telling? A lot of this is down to people's body language or how they look and so on. I'm not too sure you can tell that on Zoom.
In terms of mental health, you have quite a nice interest in it as well. Oftentimes when we think about business, we're thinking about stress. There's so many things that come into my head, especially I got through 50 pages of the book that you sent me, which was wonderful. It seems to have quite a big take, or at least you have quite a considerable interest in the whole aspect of mental health. Could you expand on that a small bit?
Yeah, and I won't keep you all day. I suffer from depression. Luckily, it's don't know what the exact term is, kind of subclinical is the term. It's, you know, it happens to me every now and then. Probably in my life, I've had like 4 or 5 serious episodes. I'm just coming out of one now, but we had our lads' lunch yesterday, and it's 4 pals of mine who I've known since 11. They're all a pain in the ass, by the way. If they're listening to this, they're all, and you know, the beauty about it, Pat, is they don't give you an inch, like, you know. Anyway, I won't go into those boogers, but anyway, we were talking about mental health at lunch yesterday, and one of my pals from Wexford turned around and he said, "Dec, it's great you talk about it." And I did a dinner a couple of years ago for Aware, and behind closed doors, and I talked about my experiences and so on. And about 5 people came up to me afterwards and kind of in a hushed voice said, "Oh, we're delighted you said it," but they wouldn't say it in front of anybody else, you know. My brother has it, or mom has it, or whatever, you know. So I think we've really come on a lot in Ireland. I think you see the words mental health here all the time. I still think there's a stigma behind it. I love the Alan Quinlans and the Cusacks and all the sports guys who've come out about it, and I think that's very powerful. And you know, I'm a Munster fan, and I think Quinny is God. But for somebody who is tough as him to come out about mental health, it kind of makes it acceptable and so on. Going back to curiosity, for this recent episode, I did so many things, Pat, including learning how to breathe with your expertise. The joke in the family is I did so much that we don't know what fucking cured me, you know, it got me right. I think I told you, and by the way, this is unfortunate in one way, is I got a brain scan in, there's probably better terminology about that. I got it done in America. You can't get it done here. And it is expensive. But I have 2 psychiatrists, one here and one in Colombia. They were jumping with joy with the X-rays. I call them X-rays, right? With the photographs and stuff. And I said, "Why are you guys so excited?" They said, "We would love every patient to have this." And by the way, without going into huge detail, one of the scans showed oxygen deficiency in my brain. Now, the kids' joke was my brain was going to be more like Homer Simpson, right? But to be serious about it, it also showed oxygen deficiencies, and that's why I'm learning loads about breathing from you. I have to get more oxygen to the brain, and you know, there's several ways of doing that, and I'll do it. So there's curiosity, and you know, all my kids are adults, and my partner Monica. It's really, and I don't want to say this as a kind of a bit of advice, but when people see you try, they're 100% behind you. I just think it must be hard for, you know, when you're down, you just don't have the motivation. When people don't try, I think that's probably hard in relationships and so on. So nearly part of the curiosity is my family, because I just want to show them that, you know, what's the best way? I say that I'm not scared of depression anymore, but it's a pain in the ass, you know. So I've shown my family I can hack it, but also they know that, you know, they kind of make jokes about it, and I love that, you know. Jesus, Dad's in New York to get his head fucking scanned, you know. But you know, by the way, I'm not intelligent or medical like yourself, but the reality there is, if you break your fucking leg, you get an X-ray. If there's something wrong with our head, we don't think about scans. Now, listen, it's expensive. If I won the lotto, I'd like to think that everybody who wants one could get one. But you have to talk about it. And I'm not saying bad things about Tony, but when I got my first episode, I stayed with him for a couple of weeks. And he gave me John Wayne talk: pull up your fucking socks and be a man, and you know, you need to be a father, da 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 da. He came back 4 days later, and apologized. And he said he did piles of research on it, and he didn't realize how bad it was. And I love that because he had the balls to say,
Totally.
apologize and so on. Yeah.
Absolutely. But also, he went off and did some research with it, because there's still that idea, and I know we have moved on, but in some ways, Dec, I often wonder, are we putting it now so much into the open? I actually like some of your dad's thinking, because sometimes we need that too. We need, it's very difficult, isn't it? The human being is just so complex. For some people, they do need a little bit of a push in order to get going. And for other people, it's different. It's really difficult to know.
I learned on this recent ballot, and I've had it for about 6 months and out of it, thank God. But people recommended to me a gratuity app. And that's what actually Tony was saying. You're a lucky bugger. You have 4 healthy kids. You don't have to worry about money every day. So that's what he was saying. Now, he could have taken the John Wayne bit off. And he did in the end. But the gratuity, I wish I'd done it 400 years ago. It's amazing. Some of the stuff I write down is, Jesus, the lamb curry that Bonnie did last night was out of this world. And that's what it does. It grinds you down. And, I'm lucky enough to live near the canal here in Dublin. That walk every day, every morning. It's just fantastic. So I'm not saying it's for everybody, but if people are suffering, the 2 things I would say, not advice, just things I would say, is talk about it. And it doesn't mean you have to talk. You don't have to stand in Ayr Square and go on about it. And the other thing is a bit of gratuity of where you are, and anyway, it worked for me,
So what do you mean by gratuity? Is it's the very simple things that we often overlook, and just to write down what's 10 really positive things in my life that are so simple.
This app, I'm looking at the phone now. This app is called Gratuity, and you only have to fill in 3 lines, and the lines are tiny. But the thing that's great about it is it kind of nearly wakes you up in the morning, right? It kind of barks at you and said, "What are you happy about today?" Or I didn't mean to use the word happy. What gives you gratuity today? What are you grateful for? And sometimes you're scratching your head trying to think of something, and then you have to realize that you just had a bloody lovely shower, and my hygienist, she's great, in the dentist the other day told me, and I love it, said, "Have you ever washed your teeth sitting down?" And I thought it was like on the beer or something, right? And I've been doing it, and you wash your teeth longer, so I think what was another comment I heard was brilliant is we probably spend 5 minutes a day on our dental health. Why don't we do that on our mental health,
Absolutely. Yeah, and it can be easily done, incorporated into our own way of life. I think there's not enough talked about getting out of our head, and it's not just about directing our attention or our focus, but I think our education system is very archaic in terms of it's teaching people how to go into the workforce, but it's not giving them the skills to deal with the stresses and strains involved in that. It really, really needs, there has to be a change there. You can't just train the human brain how to think and not give people the skills to be able to stop thinking, to have some degree of control over the mind, because ultimately overthinking is a problem. And what you talked about.
I'm sorry, Pat, cut across it. I would love if, I don't even know who it is, if the Minister for Education said to you and me, redefine TY. Now, I know you would put breathing on the course. I'd put mental health on the course. I'd put cooking on the course. I put swimming on the course, fixing fucking bikes, really practical, important driving. And, at the end of the TY, you'd be going like, Jesus, I know how to cook an omelet for mom. Or when I do get down, I know what to do. And, so.
Would you as well, would you put managing finance on the course? Because I think a lot of people get stressed over lack of money.
A pal of mine the other day, who close to your point, he said to teach kids how to do tax returns, because you're never taught it.
And it is because we aren't, in terms of our spending, there's so many people and people that I know of, and they will go on a holiday on their credit card. The holiday is two weeks and they're paying it back for the next 12 months, or Christmas time is coming up. And I know there's a pressure to provide presents to children, but we have to think about, that. And the other thing about a credit card is a totally different story about putting your hand into your pocket and taking out paper money, because it feels real, as opposed to just tapping a card. And I think tapping the card can generate a compulsive that, there's a different psyche attached, because it almost feels that it's artificial money and it's a delayed. You don't have to worry about it now, especially if it's on credit. You can pay it back anytime in the future. It causes issues. Can I come back to this? Wealth, I feel, is important. Absolutely. Even just based on the last, what's your take on it?
But, no, I didn't hear what you said. Sorry.
Wealth, I feel, is very, very important in terms of lack of money causes more problems than having money.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not a good person to talk about wealth because I've given most of it away. And very close pal, I won't give him too much recognition, but he was at the lunch yesterday. He's from Laois and said to me once, money makes you embarrassed, and it does. And by the way, I'm not goody two shoes here, but when after Ryanair IPO'd, and I know you want to talk about it, we set up the One Foundation, and there's nothing better. Let's take Christmas. When you get a present right, if that could ever be boxed and injected or swallowed, you just feel like you've nailed it. And I have a habit of saying I had a team and so on. We've been going in one time. By the way, it comes after the U2 song. The last thing I was going to do, by the way, is call it the fucking Ryan Foundation. But anyway, there's a lovely line in the U2 song about we have to carry each other, which I believe. And I put in a lot of money into the One Foundation, and I'm not saying that on the basis of bragging, but I love. Unfortunately, he passed away recently, Chuck Feeney.
Yes.
I love Chuck Feeney. Yeah, amazing man, and we're very lucky that he decided he wanted to be Irish. He could have decided he wanted to be Polish, or he didn't have to pick Ireland, but he did, thank God.
Well, his name is.
Yeah, for sure, yeah. But Chuck had a great comment. He said he hoped his last check would bounce. And I love that. And by the way, so I don't preach about. There's two things I don't preach about: taxes and philanthropy. And I don't preach about it to my kids, because it's up to them if they want to be. The kind of term in here, we have one side that makes money and the other side that gives it away, and the finance guys call the foundation do-gooders. But there's nothing. I think I told you I was recently lucky enough to do a safari. It's the first time in my life. And we did it in Tanzania, and myself and Lonnie hijacked the local primary school. Literally ran in the middle of a class with a pile of sweets. And the kids started singing. And I can send you the video. I thought it was Mick Jagger dancing around with the kids and stuff, right? And first of all, they probably never saw a black guy before, or sorry, a white guy. And second of all, I just said to Money that, when a child sings, it's special, and I just love, uh, you know, um, the pride moms take in the uniform, and, this is a poor part of Tanzania, but they were just impeccably turned out, or whatever the right phrase is. But I said to Monty when we were leaving the school, like, it was like 300 kids waving at us. Now, I know the sweets helped, right? But I said to Monty, if I could do that every morning, and I'm not doing the Geldof on it or the Chuck Feeney on it or anything else like that, but I've said it a couple of times before, Pat. I have the view that giving is more beneficial than actually receiving. And, people say, aren't you great and all that shite, that they mean well. But I don't know, I go back to the Christmas present. Like, I love vinyl, and my kids got me, Rolling Stones, albums and all that kind of stuff. That, I knew they loved it because they had nailed it for me, So that's the point I'm trying to make about philanthropy and giving the One Foundation.
But there must be something in it from a cultural point of view. The only reason I say it, like certain religions, it's almost that 10% of your income goes to charity, 10% you save. But also those same religions they encourage their followers to be entrepreneurial and to think positively about money. And sometimes I feel in Ireland, I think money was never looked at as a positive thing. And I don't know, is it because of our historical lineage that anybody who had money at the time were our planters or colonizers, that we as a generation have probably moved away a lot from that. And also I feel as well that maybe our religion, that there wasn't enough emphasis on, number one, I like the way you mentioned U2's song One. I think it's a tremendous song, but I think underlying that song is presence, that we are all connected. And it's also stillness of mind, that it's not being stuck in the head. And if you break down the lyrics sometimes, or you can kind of get that sense of it. So culturally, philanthropy is a big part of it, but yet it's not espoused that much,
So I think about this quite a bit. I think Irish people, by and large, are very generous. And you can see that anytime there's an earthquake in Turkey and all that kind of stuff. I think we have one of the highest proportions of giving as per capita. But once you cut it off at 500 quid or whatever, so I'm not having a go at people, but there's a lot of wealthy people out there who just hand it to the family, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I like your comment about religion. Like, you're gonna smile. One of the recommendations from one of my doctors was do something spiritually. Now, I regard the One Foundation a bit spiritually, but he was talking about religion, and I said, I'm not doing the Roman Catholic thing. Like, I just not. And I won't go into the reasons why now, but I think a lot of people feel like that. Then I was thinking, who my head was going towards Buddhism, but then my head also went towards who's generous, and the Jews and the Quakers are incredibly generous, So I'm not heading off to Tel Aviv or Holland or wherever else I need to go, but there is. So I don't want to say. Sorry, what? I met about 15 years ago, around that, so people won't guess who it is. I met the Taoiseach's chief of staff a couple of years ago. And I loved it because he said to me, we can't even spell philanthropy, and in the States, Biden or Obama puts their arm around you, Pat, and says, you really need to give the money to the university or to the hospital or whatever. So I think we can be better in Ireland, but it's more the kind of top 2 or 3% be better. But it's not a lecture, you know. It's I've been approached, and this is a good point. I've been approached by several people to ask me how we did the One Foundation, and people who've done well, 2 or 3 people in particular, and they loved it. And it actually became a family project where, let's say you were saying to one of your kids or whatever, I want to give 500 quid or whatever it is into Galway, you know, somewhere in Galway, and you have a debate with your family and you go, why it should be for mental health or whatever, you know. So, Lord, I'm not going to lecture on it, that's for sure.
The income or the money generated through the One Foundation, where is it directed to? Because I was also talking with Ruth, she's in the office behind me here, and she was at a bookstore in Lewisburg in County Mayo and one book. So what was the connection there?
Books at One. So I have a place in Lewisburg. Yeah. By the way, you're going to love this. The nickname for me in Lewisburg is Almost Famous. And I just love it because just in case you get above the parapet, you know, but it's brilliant. So we have 3 shops around the country now, 1 in Dublin and 2 in Connemara, in Connacht, 1 in Letterfrack and 1 in Lewisburg. Yeah, it's a charity. We sold 12,000 books last year. When you think about it, it was amazing. I'll touch on other things, but my favorite story is I met a farmer who was in the GAA section of bookstore, and because it was sports, I was able to chat away to him. He didn't know who I was, and I didn't know who he was, and so on. And I said, you know, what's it about the bookstore? And he said, you know, and I understood him 100%. He said, you know, when you go and get a cup of coffee, and then you feel guilty about keeping the table when other people are coming in. Like, we all get that a bit. Most of us do, and so on. So I come down and look at the gas section here, and nobody bugs me, and I can sit here for half an hour and so on. And so it's a bit. So our kind of the big wins we've done a lot of wins, which is great. And we're concentrating a lot now on refugees, and I'll touch upon that in a second. Our big wins has been, and you probably know them, Jigsaw.
Yes.
Jigsaw is, I call it the IKEA for mental health, because all the offices are cool. And the whole idea there, and then there's one opposite the bus station, if anybody's listening, in Galway. And it's an Australian model. And in Australia, when you go into A&E, if they think it's mental health related, you get seen a professional straight away. Now, the Australians have loads of money. I'm not too sure. Sorry, you'd like to think the HSE here could do it in every hospital or every A&E, but you know, it's just so logical. It's not funny. So we brought that to Jigsaw, which is kind of like trendy for people under 20 or 22 or whatever. We set up Social Entrepreneurs Ireland, which is also a huge win. And our view there, and I think they're 20 years old next year or this year. Our view there, Pat, was very simple. There's a social entrepreneur in every village in Ireland. And they probably don't know they're a social entrepreneur, and they're probably involved with 5 different committees, and you know, the GA, and you know, any of the charities and so on. And those people just need to be recognize that they are social entrepreneurs, and then help to be developed and so on. The last point I'd like to make on the One Foundation is, at the moment, we deal primarily at the moment, like let's say about 80% of our revenue in refugees. This is where I am going to lecture. The Irish were received all around the world and given breaks by Americans and Aussies and Brits and so on. we're shite at giving back. Like, like, and I'm not going on about the far right or anything else like this, but we did a really good job recently on the Ukrainians, and that needs to be recognized. But when you go to the centers now, and any of the emergency centers, like, we've forgotten about the Syrians or the, people from Afghanistan and so on. And I believe, by the way, I think a lot of people do great stuff. I just believe we need to do a bit more, and the government would row with me on that. I haven't had a row with them, but I bet you they'll say, well, look what we've done for the Ukrainians. And my response back to them is, well, they're European and white. Have you done the same for the Syrians and so on? So that's what the foundation does.
Well, I think it's excellent. I'm only going to make a comment in terms of, one would hope that the money that's donated is really used efficiently and is not wasted unnecessarily. And I couldn't help but read.
Sorry, you're going to love this. I keep interrupting you. I used to be chairman of Bernardo's in Ireland, and it was logical that one of our first donations in 2003 would be to Bernardo's. I sent a guy called Anthony Carraher, who's a great guy, and he worked with me for 17 years. He was our CFO. And he came back red in the face, and I said, what's up? He said, Bernardo's only take care, now this was 20 years ago, only 5,000 families in Ireland. And I said, well, isn't that good? And he goes, you could fill Pro Park with the amount of kids in child poverty in Ireland. And he said, it's not effing good enough. Like, I love the guy who was calling us all do-gooders coming over to the dark side. And the following year, we didn't give Bernardo's money because they wouldn't increase the families. Like, that makes it sound bad, but, Fergus Finlay was the CEO at the time, great guy. But his comment was, it's about quality. And so we had a little bit of a row. And we can, let's say we were giving them 300 grand, 100 grand a year, stop that for year one. So it's great to put in the metrics and use some of the business brains behind philanthropy and so on.
Oh, I think
charities hate it.
I think it's vital. And you mentioned the HSE, and I won't even go there because my comments might be positive. But I remember the Irish Times interviewed me, it's going back about 10 years ago, and it was one of these off the couch pieces. And I made the comment that Michael O'Leary should be in running the HSE. And of course, that was the headline then of my interview. And it's so true. You really do need somebody, and that's hunger, but it's passion. But it's also the drive to do things right.
I have to say, I disagree on that one.
Okay.
But, well, no. You have to have other skills, right? And so we're not going to focus in on Michael. But what I think he would have been brilliant at is during the financial crisis is sorting out the banks.
Yes, absolutely. And that was a comment made by one of the economists. It was actually David McWilliams. He said that if you're going to negotiate, you need to be a negotiator. And it should have been somebody that was taken. But again, sometimes these things fall between the cracks. Just to kind of bring it towards, if you were a 20-year-old now I know this is putting you on the spot. What direction would you like to go in terms of what sort of personality would you be? Would you do things anyway differently? In other words, is there something that a 20-year-old could learn now? Do you believe that we should be all out there as human beings, facing little challenges, growing, doing the best that we can? Like, what motivates us as human beings to be happy?
Yeah, and I hate the word happy, by the way, and nothing to do with you. I was thinking about it the other day. We use the expression happy out, right? And I'm going to have a right go of the Yanks here. They use it all the effing time, right? If I was intelligent enough to be involved with the Oxford Dictionary, I would take the word out and I would use the word being content, because, you know, we won't do it now, Pat, but like, what is happy, you know, so you can go for the 20-year-old debt. I've been really lucky. Like, you know, Ryanair nearly went wallop 13 times. You can't, you know, I went to UCD. You know, just nothing in UCD, or sorry, any college would have taught me that. So, and I might frame it a bit different, because what I had in my DNA as a kid was travel. And, you know, you go to Vietnam, one of my favorite countries in the world. Those people are content, but they don't have that much. And I kind of would remind myself a bit like that. I wouldn't have necessarily done arts in UCD, I think. But like, I remember graduating, Pat, and there was 42, I think, in our economics class, and only 2 stayed behind. Everybody went away, you know. So everything I did in a business world, and I like to think in a personal world, but certainly in a business world, I don't think I would change, but I was lucky. Made some of the luck afterwards, but you know, when you and you've seen it yourself, when you are faced with the wall of bankruptcy, you A, get very creative, and B, you get very resilient. So I'm not too sure I would change that much. I only went to the States for a year work-wise. I was hoping to go there for 4 years. And it's not about the Yanks or anything else. It's more about they have a great work culture, and they you know, they get stuff done. You know, so I was thinking about that quite a bit, that question, and I'm not too sure I would have given Dec 20 years old a bollock and that he should have done something else different, you know. Now there's not too much. I gave up rugby probably too early, and then something to do with rugby. It was just I missed the team bit and all that kind of stuff. So, but that's work, you know. Yeah. It's very hard to have a girlfriend working 12 hours a day and then say to your family, I'm off to play Galwegians next Saturday, and you know, I'm going to Galway. You're not going to come back in the same day, you know. So I'm sorry I haven't given you any more conclusive, but I don't think there's too much more I would have. It's like I'm pretty sure I might have tweaked 5% or 10%.
But there's probably a couple of points that I take from it. One is that your life is pretty aligned with you. In other words, the things that you did are pretty aligned with you. And the second thing was, yeah.
I fought with Tony a lot. I would never call him Dad. It drove him nuts. And he asked me one day why, and I said, "Well, you can't tell your dad to fuck off, but you can tell Tony to fuck off." And he said, you know, he didn't see that as funny. He just wanted to be called Dad, you know. And I fought with him a bit too much, you know. But like, you know, he used to use myself and Michael very efficiently as Jack Russells. And you know, if you teach somebody to be a Jack Russell, you're going to get a nip in the ankle, you know. So, but what I did do, and it took me a while to work it out, is when he went 60, and nothing about being 60, I just went, the fights are over. He wins, you know. Like I'm not going to fight with him anymore, you know. So that I would have changed. I would have done it earlier, but you know, you're dealing with a tough guy from Thurles who remembers at the age of 8 of not getting a council house,
It was a different era. It was totally different. And to survive in business, you had to be really, really tough. So like I can see that we are a product of our environment. Of course, genetics are going to play some role, but the environment that we're growing up in. Could the second point that I was going to go back as a 20-year-old, it worked out.
Yeah.
But you don't always think it. You don't always think that back at the time, though.
But I don't think back as a 20-year-old, and I think I was 21 leaving UCD. I don't think back and look at the wealth, and I'm not being principled here. I look at my kids and my pals, and maybe when you're 60 you do this, right? And I went 60 this year, but no, I've always like I make the comment, and I genuinely believe this, that my kids are a better person than I am, and that's just amazing to watch. So the reason I'm kind of humming is, what's the great comment, Pat? You never see on a tombstone, you work too hard.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. And life goes by very, very quickly.
Yeah. By the way, I think, again, going back to luck, we had a good work ethic in the family, and I think I'd be saying to all parents, like, my eldest guy Connor is very witty. He's in his 30s now, but I had him working in a bar that we were involved with, cleaning up the tables and stuff. And he rang me one day and he said, "I'm going to call social welfare on you." Right? He said he was underage and 14 or 15 and so on. But he learned loads from it, So.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. Listen, I enjoyed the conversation, and for the listener as well, I think they will pull little nuggets out of it too. And it's quite a different departure from what I normally talk about. So listen, thanks so much for your time. I know there's a lot going on. In terms of One Foundation, what's the website?
I should know that. I don't. I think it's onefoundation.ie, but just Google it. Yeah.
Okay, so One Foundation.
We don't take in donations, and we don't take in requests. We go out for ourselves.
Wow.
Anyway.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Likewise.
Thank you, Dick.
Thank you for listening to the Oxygen Advantage podcast. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and maybe take the time to leave us a review. The Oxygen Advantage podcast is available from all your podcast providers.